day of January 2025. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing well on this Thursday. Is it Thursday? Wednesday. That's good. I gotta double check myself here now. Carbon-free Hinkley. Look at that. As carbon-free is the biggest construction site on the entire planet in history. And they're calling it carbon-free net zero. As Miles Allen would say. Net zero. It's hard to wrap your mind around this story. You know, anything to do with nuclear. Of course, that's Hinkley Point Cedar. That's the model of it they showed you, right? Doesn't really do it justice. Like all the nuclear plants worldwide, as you start to zoom out, that's a satellite picture of Sellafield. As you zoom out, you start to really appreciate what's going on. Nuclear power plants, the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation. Like, more than enough to contaminate all those farms every single day. If you dug up all the topsoil there every single day, that would be insidiously radioactive the next day again, because there's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide doing the same thing. And the radiation doesn't just travel 10, 20, 30, 40 miles. This covers the entire planet all day, every day. Invisible plumes that you can't perceive. Very concerning when they call it carbon-free. Or carbon-free. It's not carbon-free. It's the most resource-intensive industry, period, bar nothing. And then the stuff left over, just the production of the uranium is unbelievable. The production of uranium for a single nuclear plant is more intensive than gas, oil, and coal combined for the same energy source. Not only that, it needs how much energy do you need to light up this site every day? How much do you need for those cranes? This is just a fraction of the site, by the way. How much energy do you need for all the welders? How much energy do you need for all... I mean, they got big ships offshore that were for 8 miles of tunnels. It's going to need 7 million gallons a minute. Or 7 million liters a minute or something like that. We got the numbers coming up. A little late getting started there. I had the dry heaves. They're always no fun. And then when I finally got the old bilge cleaner working, it took a few extra minutes before I finally made it in the studio. Right at the point where we're supposed to go live, I decided I was going to get the dry heaves. It's pretty rare, but it happens to me too. Over budget. Like they're light years away from finishing it. And 9,000 little monkeys running around every day. Useful little idiots. And they estimated $57 billion already. Like, how do you get that far over budget anyway? For that kind of money, you could have built 4 times the amount of geothermal in the country. And it'd be up and running 10 years ago. Would have been up and running the next couple of years. From when you started. This is a despicable industry. It's a despicable industry. And this is lying on a grand scale. This is criminal. It's under the racketeering statutes. This is criminal what they're doing, calling this carbon free. You'll see that coming up here. One of your biggest construction sites, perhaps the biggest, and the narrator that was doing the story, Let me get back to this again here. We're almost... You can call into these shows. I'm here in Canada at 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. I've been a busy little beaver the last couple of days. We got two big 4,500 pound winches ordered in. And that's pretty cool. They're not cheap. But I got to have them. I got two of them broke down at the one time on me. And so we'll do an install video when that shows up so you can actually see it. I cut off one of the, because one of them was welded onto the trailer, right? That's why nobody can steal it on you when you're not around. And I got to have them for the skidoo anyway, right, on the trailer, because you know how hard it is. Like you're taking a big chance flying up on a trailer with a skidoo anyway, right? But they got a tendency to get stuck because they're not like a bike where they got a ton of traction. One of Europe's biggest construction sites. Anyway, we'll have videos for all of that stuff. I reformatted the videos I shot the other day. Maybe I'll have time to get to that. This is a single story we're going to try to cover in a single night. It's so laughable. It's not laughable when you really think what's behind this whole story. Perhaps even the biggest. No, it's the biggest. It's not just the biggest in Europe. It's the biggest worldwide. And we're going to put this on the big screen, the big shot screen. I was amazed they came out with this video. I was like, sweet. But just look at activity around the site, like the buildings and material. It's very difficult. It's very, very difficult to comprehend. And they're very keen not to give you a whole site shot to one time. But it's enough cement there to build a sidewalk to Rome and back from United Kingdom. It's just crazy. And everything is incredibly radioactive, which the neutron bombardments can't be recycled. Even though Britain now, the scumbags that Britain's using now, are going to recycle 97% of the site, when 97% of it was normally too radioactive. The new young generation now is like, oh, we can use it. Make children's toys out of the radioactive material. Forks and knives for the slaves in Great Britain. Why do they call it Great Britain? What's so great about it? It ain't the weather. Ain't the wages. It ain't the police there, that's for sure. It certainly ain't the universities, the academics, the scientists. They're the lowest forms of life. I'm still kind of a little congested. My apologies. Going to be what it's going to be. So when they say nuclear is carbon-free, are they guilty of committing racketeering statute crimes? And how come I only got 12 people on a show I've been doing for over a decade? Oh, that's right. Called censorship. Desperation from the nuclear industry. It's the only educational program on the planet in history. So this is carbon-free. This is just a fraction of the site. They're very careful. There are some pictures here where you kind of get scale of that site. But as we try to claw our way through the propaganda, Hinkley Point C. It's absurd to call something like this carbon-free, isn't it? It's disgusting, right? It's a coward thing to do, see? It shows their contempt. And, I mean, they have utter contempt. It's supposed to be around $4 billion or something. It's $57 billion now. Hinkley Point C is the first nuclear power plant the UK has built in decades. UK is not building jack shit. French is building it. UK is too stupid to build something like that. The nuclear industry in the UK is only good for cutting your throats. That's all they're good for. Giving you cancer, giving you heart attacks, giving you lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline gland, catastrophic doses of radiation from the emissions. That's all they're good at. And it's set to usher in a whole new generation of scumbags for the country. A whole new generation. What the hell are they talking about? Energy infrastructure. They're trying to sell something. This is what this is all about. Basically a big apology video they done. And the lies they told was shocking. You'll see some of that coming up. It's hard to appreciate how big what we're looking at, just that part there is. It's so hard to appreciate. It's so impossible to appreciate the enormity. Like, they need 2 gas, oil, and coal plants dedicated to this site. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to build it, to run it for its lifetime, and for 60 years or more after to decommission it. And so if you just took those 2 gas, oil, and coal plants, it would produce more electricity than this stupid idiot disease factory will ever produce. These are disease factories. After they take the fuel out of the pool the first time, it's still splitting atoms for millions of people. And there's no containment. That's going into all the farms that are surrounding these sites and everywhere else. Like, the most important thing that humanity can do is put an end to this industry. It's better to have no electricity than nuclear. I can tell you that right now. These are disease factories. They never stop hemorrhaging radiation. And there's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. Not a single species, certainly not humans. There's an instant effect from inhaling the anthropogenic man-made radiation. Beset by huge delays. Delays! Environmental disputes. These are not disputes. The so-called and they label anybody with concerns as environmentalist. And that label then is used to disrespect them and disregard them. And cost rise. To the point where it's now expected to become the most expensive project of its kind ever built. No, this is the most expensive project ever built. By far. By leaps and bounds on top of that. Hey, we got a caller. Oh, we got James calling in. Woohoo! Hey, James.
Yeah, I just wanted to call real quick. I had a run-in with Craig the other day. And, well, I kind of started it. I just created this. It was like a month ago. Like, I wrote a comment on one of his videos. I'm just like, I hope you know you're going to hell for defaming Dana and Kevin. And I just went on and on and whatever.
That's awesome, man.
And he finally wrote back. And he did this the same song and dance. Tell me one thing on my channel that you can prove me wrong, all that crap, that whole thing. I'm like, I just write back, you're due for your annual mRNA booster, Craig. You need to get your shot, you know. And he's like, well, you're just obfuscating. You let Dana and Kevin know that if they want to debate me. I'm like thinking to myself, I'm like, is that what this is all about?
No, of course not.
You know, like, yeah. Craig. So I write back, I'm like, there's no debate.
No.
All you're doing is capitalizing off the ignorance of the public to make them believe that nuclear is clean and safe, while defaming Dana and Kevin at the same time. You're just the scum of the earth.
Yeah,
you didn't write
100%.
Back. Doesn't write back. You know, and it's like...
Yep.
He knows what I'm doing. You know, he won't fuck with me, though.
No. No, not only that, you've been challenging him for quite a while, right? You actually...
he don't mess with me. And it's like he's on a directive to only mess with you and Kevin.
It's 100%. 100%, James. Well said. Yeah.
It's so clear.
Yeah, he's the weasel of the weasels. I got a folder. A huge folder of his lies, and he made some comments where he said, like, of all the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of comments I've made, prove me wrong, right? I've never been proven wrong. That's quite the statement. I don't have thousands and thousands. I don't have thousands of comments, let alone thousands and thousands and thousands. And so what James is trying to say to people is, like, this guy is a prolific monster, right? For the nuclear industry. He's mentally ill in many senses of the word, right?
Well, and that's what I said. I'm like, you're either mentally ill or you're being paid by the nuclear industry.
Yeah,
it's one or the other.
Well, it's both, I do believe, right? Personally, right?
Well, probably both.
Yeah, personally, yeah.
But it's just getting to the point of it, right? I mean,
no, 100%.
You can't debate the fact that this, and
let me cut you off. So for people that are wondering what's going on here, there's a picture on my screen. Now, Craig is telling James on the phone there and everybody else, thousands and thousands of videos, that nothing got out of the building to the left. That's Craig's official version, right? Nothing got out of the building to your left, which is reactor 4. And he's saying that about all the reactors. He's saying nobody's ever been hurt. Nobody's ever been scratched. Nobody's been ever sneezed upon by anything from the nuclear industry. And it's unbelievably despicable to even suggest something like that. Go ahead, James. I didn't mean to cut you off, but...
Well, I even bring that up to him. I'm like, it's on video, Craig. Yeah. It blew to smithereens. He's like, that was just a hydrogen blast. Like, what the hell caused the hydrogen? What caused the hydrogen buildup?
Which is a meltdown. Yeah, exactly.
What the hell's... You know, and he doesn't write. And that's the end of the script. It's a hydrogen blast.
Yeah, well said. That's the end of the script.
That's
the end of the script for Craig.
That's what they can do. So.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
I don't know. I mean, I just wanted to call in and just bring that up because it's just been like eating me up today because it's just been like that's what's going on. Like he won't screw with me. I'm doing these.
He knows, man. He knows you're like. See, he knows he cannot win an argument with you. Can't win a debate with you.
But he has to understand. I'm mere.
He hasn't got a hope of winning a debate against you.
I had this conversation with Colette the other day. I'm like, you realize that the education that Dana has provided us. We're such a small group of people that are so well informed.
Oh, there's no one is beating any of you guys. No, exactly. Go ahead, James. I'm sorry.
And so, and they're so afraid of you, Dana, because they don't care about me. Because all they know is they don't want more of people like me out there doing AI videos and all this other crazy shit.
No, I mean, just you on your own, what you've accomplished is amazing, boy. It's amazing. And you're just started, basically, right on top of that.
Yeah.
You're not even wound up yet. Wait till someone pisses you off one of these days.
This is like no one's doing this level.
No one's ever done that.
The videos I'm producing take hours and hours.
Oh, yeah. And every video you can see, and it's hard to appreciate, it's hard to believe it sometimes, that you actually get better on every single video. You're way more better.
There's so much art embedded in all of this.
Oh, it's amazing, man. I love it. I friggin' love it personally, right?
And what's really interesting, what I wanted to tell you too, was that this is so groundbreaking in the thought of this, that you can take a concept and wrap it into any culture and make it work because AI understands that culture, right?
100%.
And so you know where I'm getting at. So that's what I've been experimenting with that latest track I did in Hindi. And it was like, it's going nuts. And I promoted it just to India, as an experiment to see what would happen.
They're very anti-nuclear. Yeah, they're very anti-nuclear down there too. I bet they've been bullied. The police are vicious, right? So it's hard for them.
But the video dives deep into that. They have a caste system, so they have those that are considered the untouchable.
Right.
And there's a group of these people who are like hardcore, like they're everyone thinks they're disgusting, but inside their mindset, they believe that they have God inside of them, and so like they can do no wrong. I'm really superficial at this whole thing.
Yeah.
But what I realized was they're missing the aspect of nuclear energy. That's the ultimate Shiva destroyer. And it's like, I feel like I'm just like cracking into that seed into the Indian culture where they're like finally understanding this, like, holy shit.
Which is that's something we desperately need too, right? Is somebody figuring out how to talk to other cultures.
It's not me. It's just me leveraging AI to get there.
Yeah, that's
And
what I'm talking about,
that's
though,
what's
right?
possible now.
Oh,
That's
100%.
what's possible.
And I see it, and I'm like, that's brilliant. I love it. When I see you transitioning, right? You know, that's crazy stuff, man.
But it's so. What the world needs to understand is we can all do this. You know, I'm not special at all. I'm just, I'm just trying to carve a road.
You basically said, I'm not putting up with it anymore, and you're going to do something about it, right? You know.
But they've never been challenged like this before. The nuclear industry has no idea.
No. How do you fight it back against AI? That is like there's so many things you can do, right? But when it comes to music, there's nothing more powerful. There really isn't, right? And to get that down right, and then now to marry it up with the videos, right? So that the videos are articulating what's going on in the song is holy shit stuff. That's stuff I've never seen. I have dreamed about this stuff, by the way, but I never ever thought I'd live to see the day. I really didn't. And now you're getting to the point now where every video is starting, like, it must be an absurd amount of work to do each video is all I can say.
I've got a system down. I'm not, I've got things that I've got, like workflows and things to make things a little bit easier next
absolutely,
time and so forth. But it's a work in progress.
That's the school of hard knocks, basically, yeah.
And it's really limited to the technology that you have that's available now. I mean, this is still kind of prehistoric.
It is. That's the crazy thing. Isn't that crazy? Because it is. It's nowhere near 1% of its potential. Right? Like AI isn't. That's what they say anyway.
And so everything I'm doing is kind of like it's kind of locked in time. For those that kind of notice, it's kind of like how the brush strokes of early paintbrushes made these little tiny like marks, and the misspellings and the AI. That's all a relic of where we are today. So they'll be able to look back and realize, oh, they were doing this back in 2024. 2020. They'll be like blown away, like this.
100%.
This kind of level of stuff.
Well, like you seized up on an opportunity. Then you had to figure it out, make it happen. You had to experiment relentlessly just to get a product each time, and then you see the potential yourself that you can't deny no more. And now you just got.
Well,
go ahead.
But what's really important, Dan, I tell this to everybody. It's all about what you learned in kindergarten. If you can go back to that
foundation
and try to just use your imagination, that's what makes this work.
Wow,
it's not technical skill.
No.
There's no technical skill at all.
It's a foundation.
It's all imagination. But that last track, I just uploaded a video before the show.
I seen that, yeah.
Something I try to promote it, and it's in a pending status, which means that, and it's never been this long. And I think that someone has to review it in order to accept. I only paid $20. I don't pay a lot. I just figured this is a way to break through the censorship.
That's a great point. 20,
like
you go into a different algorithm when you give them money, is what you're saying, right? You're
right. Right, that's the theory. Like you can break through the mold that way.
Nice
and
one.
It seems to work. There's no way I could have all these views on if I didn't do that. That's the only way. That's the only way. My channel has got like 2,000 people on because I'm doing that. If I didn't, there would only be 50 people.
Gotcha. Wow. So like a little bit could go a long way when it comes to like Google is such a weird creature. There's so much AI going on there itself. People are going to come out and they're going to look at it to make sure it's. I don't know what to say about that. I don't know how that works. I shouldn't say anything because I'm not sure myself, right? I just know that Google does work on an algorithm, and when you get into the right algorithm, it'll promote you. It's so greedy, it will promote you, right?
Well, we know there's no shadow of doubt in the figure. nuclear industry as a PR machine with billions of dollars of disposable money
Yeah.
to try to make nuclear look good.
Every year,
They're
folks.
paying YouTube money to downrank anything that's bad on them. Because that's why my video's in a pending status right now, because of the title alone. That's the only reason. There's nothing
Oh,
I said
yeah,
that's any
sure.
conflict restrictions at all.
I bet you that's
I
exactly
didn't do
what's
anything
going on.
wrong.
Because
It's
you got the words
obvious.
anti-nuclear. You got the words anti-nuclear there.
Yeah,
see? Yeah.
I'm just being a mirror to the system, and I'm proving it right. Just like I proved Craig wrong, or exposed him. Anyway, I don't want to take much
I love
more
it.
time. I just
That's
had to get this
that's
out.
great stuff. I love that
really
stuff.
want to say
No, thank you for doing the things you're doing, James. Like
It'll
the
keep
world
going on.
the world needed that, right? I needed that. I mean, a lot of people need that music, that energy that comes with it. There is energy with music, right? It lights up 19% of your brain when you hear music. It lights up 19% of your brain that you never use, only when you're hearing music. And so it's something special for the human experience too, even though we don't understand it. But there's something special going on with music. And when it's weaponized, no pun intended, because that's, it's weaponized against an evil entity, because that's what nuclear is. Nuclear is an evil entity. It really is, seems to be an entity of that's behind this. I mean, because every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. There's there's something sinister going on, right?
And they're scared to death of us.
Yeah, a little tiny group
really
of people.
And so
a little tiny group of people.
Doing it. I'm never going to give up.
Fucking
You're
right.
not going to give up.
Fucking
so
right.
We're
yeah.
we'll see
That's
how it goes.
the
But anyway,
fact.
Dan, thank you so much. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, I love you, buddy. You take
All right,
care.
take
Good
care.
stuff. Yeah. Bye bye. That's James Lucid, folks. You know James in the comments section. And if you're around here at all, James is a great supporter. And now he has dove into the wicked machine, and he's making waves, because he's producing music, anti-nuclear music, that tells a story, which is, as far as I can tell, throughout history, the best music is music that tells a story, right? And he's using AI, he's leveraging it to create the music, and then also to create the videos to match up to it. But it's not just videos per se; it's art, in every sense of the word. It's art. Okay, so let's get back to. I just love that stuff. It's hard to appreciate it, but I love that kind of stuff, and I never expected in my lifetime to see something like that. And when I listen to I'm so confident in him right now, that if he posts a video, say right now, when we get to the end of the show, I go over to play one of his songs for the closing. He's got a brand new video there. I'm going to play it. I'm not going to hesitate, because I know that he's so tuned in now. It's very difficult to imagine him posting anything that's not fairly polished, right? But he's still early in this game. He's, like he said earlier, right? He's got a learning curve, and he's just determined. But he's already passed that Rubicon, as far as I'm concerned. I'm making a playlist now. I got to take a day or a couple of days or a week or something, go through all of his videos and fave my personal songs that I think will appeal to everybody, and get them in that playlist, right? And so that people, when they start to go through the playlist, start to think to themselves, well, I should download this and put it on my kids' phones, or play it in the office, or play it in the shop, or whatever the case may be, or elevator music and everything else, because he's got some elevator music. Jingle Beckles, I never laughed so hard in my life when I see that in the elevator. That was so funny. In such a great way, right? Look at this carbon-free site here. This is just a fraction of the site. This is carbon-free. At risk of being overshadowed by controversy, the site Atoms for Peace. In the mid-1950s, after the horrors of the nuclear industry, Atoms for Peace. But there is no Atoms for Peace these sites are going to hemorrhage radiation, and I mean hemorrhage radiation, into the environment forever and ever and ever. Because it never goes away. You can't destroy it in incinerators, for instance, or battery acid or anything else. You can't get rid of it. And it attacks everything with replicating cells and triggers autoimmune response that doesn't know how to deal with it outside of attacking it with white blood cells for the rest of the birds, the insects, the bees, the flowers, the trees. Everything that will attack it because it doesn't know what to do with it. Like trees will make a sap or something and try to encode it. We make a tumor to try to, they call it a sarcophagus. It's actually a tumor to try to deal with it when it's in your body. And after the weapons testing, which was a nuclear war, same bomb, same radioactive fallout, and imagine a nuclear war where we do, one country shoots 1,000 nuclear weapons, the other country shoots another 1,000 nuclear weapons. Well, that's already happened. And some of these weapons, like the Soviet Union's biggest bomb was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki's. And it's like you say, Nagasaki wasn't that big of a bomb. Yeah, try telling that to Nagasaki. Tell that to their loved ones to see the reaction on their faces, the contempt that'll be on their faces, or the distaste for whoever uttered those statements. In between, the UK made its own piece of history at the Calder Hall. And Calder Hall, of course, was used to make plutonium. And so they're very select. When you see these pictures, you start to get a little tiny inkling of what's really going on. You start to see the farmland. But if you look at every nuclear power plant, you're going to see that particular attribute. Except for a couple that are in the city, right? Like Pickering, Ontario, Canada, for instance. They're right in the city where there's a couple of million people right there. So it's the equivalent of having it surrounded by farms. But to call that carbon-free, and the sign on the dome, this is a massive dome, I can't remember, was it 5,000 tons or something? That's the biggest crane on the planet right there. You got any idea how much energy it takes to move that a few inches? They need to light up this whole site. The whole story is crazy, and they call it carbon-free. That's in desperation because the average person will never see these pictures. They'll never say, "Well, I don't like," because it doesn't resonate for them because they're propagandized from childhood with Spider-Man and the Hulk and everything else, all the way to the present. Right? You're under constant siege from the nuclear industry, from Hollywood, from the universities and the schools. Calling this site, and it doesn't do it justice. The picture doesn't do it justice. Like, how many times in these pictures tonight have you seen people? You don't, right? Because you're so far away. It's very difficult to comprehend. So just think of this as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's a 12-story building, basically, right here. It's a city. It's like a city. But it's much worse. I mean, for the water alone, and we're going to get to that coming up, but, I want to reinforce that for the water, for a typical reactor worldwide, is 4,500 tons a minute. It's 1 million gallons every minute that reactor has to be flushed with to boil water, to power 1 million homes. But it needs 4,500 tons of water. And so if you stood in front of your house and 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks full of water, 2,200 pounds of water, drove past your house every minute, you would appreciate how much water we're talking about. And done it every minute, 1,440 minutes a day, 7 days a week, 4 weeks a month. Every second of every day you have all this water in one-ton trucks, 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks driving past your house. Then you would appreciate just that one facet of how much energy you need. And to call that carbon-free and try to put that on a pedestal and try to justify it under such an egregious lie and dishonest and deceptive and deceitful. Calder Hall's main purpose was made to make plutonium for nuclear weapons. And plutonium, of course, is named after the devil because it's such a carcinogenic. If you got plutonium in your body, you're going to end up with 3 tumors. The skeleton tumors, bone tumors, lung tumors and liver tumors. And around 80% of the victims or insects or animals or everything else will die of the bone tumors, which is a terrible, insidious way to spend your last moments on this planet. And so when he called this carbon-free, there should be scientists swinging from every one of those cranes. There should be journalists swinging from every one of those cranes. Because it's such a dishonest, such a disingenuous thing to say. Such a disrespectful thing to say. And let me show you coming up here. So under the ocean, they got 8 miles of tunnels. And these tunnels are about 40 feet wide. And in order to move that much water, that's as much energy as a small town on its own. It has to do that every minute. For each reactor, not just for all reactors, but for every reactor, it needs at least 4,500 tons. It needs, we'll get to it, I think it's 7 million liters a second or something for this site, total. A little bit stocked up here. I'll just jump out of the frame for a second and clean my sinuses. So surely then its missions to construct a brand new power plant has all gone swimmingly. Swimmingly. I mean, I'm going to show you a story coming up about how nuclear kills fish. And the narrator was saying that it kills a few tons of fish a year. That's what they had said. Like, this thing kills tons of fish every few minutes or something. When you see the numbers, it's quite shocking, really. And to call and now everything on this site. Let me go backwards. Everything on this site, every piece of copper, everything is triply inspected by independent company. So they have engineers will inspect everything 3 different times before it's allowed to be used on the site. And a lot of it's rejected. And then they call this carbon free. You got to go back to the day where a lawyer got dealt with severely right away. It's criminal what they're doing is under the racketeering statutes. What they're doing, and Great Britain, I don't know what's so great about it, but Britain has their versions of racketeering statutes. And this industry should be held accountable through that statute. It's a criminal statute. And when you look at these barges, it still won't resonate how big this actually is. And there are some pictures coming up. We'll give you some of the scales. So the model of the Hinkley Point, this is the model of Hinkley Point C. And the first thing you notice is all the farms in the background. What you don't know is when you look at these sites from a satellite picture like this, it's monstrous. Because every one of those farms is a weapon against humanity. Everything is radioactive food coming at it, or radioactive milk. Or you can't grow food or any product without it being incredibly radioactive. And just the smallest amounts of radiation is catastrophic to everything with replicating cells and needs to be stopped. It's not acceptable for 2 seconds. The project has gotten extremely complicated and pretty chaotic. I mean, and look at this picture here. You actually get some context of the farms close by. They were very careful not to show you a picture like that. Well, they were very careful. Like this is one of the pictures that was released. Because they want to acclimate you to accepting that these things are surrounded by farms. That's one of the ways that they manipulate people and into complacency. Oh, well, they wouldn't build it in farmland unless it was okay, Dana. And no, stupid. They're evil people, moron. That's my response. I don't have the patience anymore to sugarcoat. And I don't think it's appropriate to do it. I think everybody, no matter who you are, sugarcoating stuff like this or misrepresenting it should be a crime too. Because you're talking about the emissions is lethal to everything with replicating cells. And so it deserves prominence. The truth deserves the prominence. 6 have been shut down nuclear reactors in just the last 2 years. And there hasn't been a new power plant built here since the 1980s. And it should never exist today. The reason they haven't built anything since the 1980s is because former generations have acknowledged that this is a stupid industry that shouldn't exist. And it was like on a drop of a hat that Boris Johnson came out and announced fundings, right? At the same time, Boris Johnson had just removed restrictions for baby food and cereal from the nuclear wasteland at Fukushima. 2 years later, he removed restrictions for adults. What does that tell us? 2 years before it, he removed restrictions from the most deadly food on the planet for babies and for kids. That's who eats cereal, right? Babies eat baby food and kids eat cereal. So 2 years later, they removed the restrictions for the adults, for vegetables and rice and everything else. Like, if that's not evil, what actually is? What's the definition of evil? Because my definition of evil, I can guarantee you, supersedes the average person's definition of evil, because I'm honest and I'm knowledgeable. Right? There is no safe amount, not even a single atom. When it's in your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells. So now your immune system is under siege because you're concentrating white blood cells to an area to build a tumor around a foreign object, in this case known as anthropogenic man-made radiation. And today let me just digress for a minute. Today I had to get the snowblower out and get that working, just because snow's just around the corner, right? And so I finally got that working, because my throttle has a rabbit on one side and a turtle on the other side, and you got to put the throttle all the way up to the rabbit. I had it opposite, and because I haven't tried to start it up for quite a long time, right? And I was like, I'm an idiot, but that's because I was doing so much today. And then the generator. The Honda generator, because you're going to lose power maybe, right? I want to have that fresh fuel and everything, and then add a conditioner to it, so if it's sitting there, it's going to be okay. And then add some enhancement. What do you call it? Some booster to the fuel to boost its percentage of oomph. And then get the skidoo out and acid wash the aluminum on the skidoo, because we're going to be out on the skidoo when we can. And that's one of the reasons we needed winches. We need a winch for, and I do need another winch for the skidoo, right? I can't pick something like that up. And because I fell there about a month and a half ago, I got a bad back, but it's not going to stop me. And as long as I don't do too much, I'm getting better, right? But if it does something stupid, then it comes back and haunts me for a day. And then I was going to take I chopped off the battery off the trailer, because as well as I got to grind that off. I was out there this morning freezing, soaking wet, grinding that off. I want to get that out of the way and clean it up. And then I wanted to grind off, I wanted to take the winch off the ATV, right? Because I got another winch coming for that, another 4,500 pound winch coming from that one. And call it, donated another $50 a day. And so that was a big deal, because the winches were cost me more than I was expecting it, right? So that helps. Well, I can't buy any of this unless people donate, right? And we don't have many people contributing. So it's quite a struggle, but, we over the last couple of years, we had built up, because we're researchers too. We do, field research. And over the last 2 years, I decided I got to build a machine shop, so to speak, right? So I got all the welders, all the equipment, all kinds of spare, nuts and bolts and everything else gathered up. I got enough grinders and everything else. I can do most things myself, even though I should never have to do this stuff. I do enjoy it, but I'm just not healthy anymore, right? I never was. I haven't been healthy since I had a diving accident, a commercial diving accident. I was a commercial diver, which is the most dangerous job on the planet because every day is a disaster, right? But it's really special to be a diver, and but it's quite scary. Overcoming your fears is not something that comes natural to humans. So, and you don't want to when you as a commercial diver. I'm around 14,000 hours on the ocean floor, so I actually know what marine life is all about. I probably got more hours on the ocean floor than any scientist out there, or marine biologist or anybody else, and I care, right? I care about the species. You know, I consider them my friends. I'm very privileged to spend all this time with the species. And to go out on research expeditions for 6 years, 4 to 5 months a year, and see all the species are gone, is a shock that you can't get. I can never get over that. I can never switch that experience off, that horror. And it was caused by the nuclear industry. The nuclear industry, Fukushima was a big pulse event. And Fukushima, if you look up Fukushima on a satellite, it looks just like that. Surrounded by farms as far as you can see. So everything is radioactive from all of these farms, and it's going to poison whoever eats it. If that's not monstrous, and there's every nuclear power plant, except for a few, a very fraction of them, has that particular attribute, where they're surrounded by farms as far as you can see. I just want to change my... I want to digress for a minute just to switch me off, and so I can switch back on again. Because I had a hard time getting ready for the show tonight, but I knew I had to get a show in on the regular schedule. And it's been a busy couple of days. A good couple of days. We got lots accomplished. And I always feel guilty if I don't do a show. Like, I done a show the other day at 6 a.m. my time, because I figured, well, I could do a show right now, 6 a.m., and if I don't do it, because I'm out working every day at 7:30 a.m. now, where I get up early, and I got to start moving around so that when I start going out on the skidoo, I have some kind of endurance already precedence, right? So I can get out there and actually not be totally exhausted. Because when you're out there in Mother Nature, you don't want to be exhausted because everything can happen to you. But the skidoo it's a 4-stroke, 800cc, fuel injected, liquid cooled. And it's hard to appreciate how quiet that thing is. I could probably shoot a video where I'm driving along, and it's totally listenable. You know, it's not going to be obnoxious in the background because those 4-strokes are so quiet. I was quite impressed anyway. I got a dry throat tonight, so you have to excuse me. So the project, of course, let's get back on track here now. I talk away sometimes. There's a reason for it. I want to switch gears for a moment so I can, when I come back into the narrative, then like my voice is not so, I'm not talking, because I get pretty emotional when I talk about this subject. And, you know, I'll start ranting sometimes, appropriately, hopefully. But it's hard on your throat. When you sit there for 2 hours, typically, and you talk, it's pretty rough on your throat, right? I'm used to it, but it's still. I would love to have a host, but how am I going to find a host knowledgeable enough about this and aware enough and passionate enough to pick up the slack, see? And so my big hope was to do interviews with all kinds of academics way back in the day when I was gullible, when I was naive, when I was. But I've never been able to identify an academic that I would be able to, you know, bring into the show. Now, you know, it's not they're out there. Don't get me wrong. But I don't see the passion out there. I haven't come across it, or I reach out to them. So, like from this scale, when you look, you can see all the cranes there. Each one of these cranes is an enormous amount of electricity. 6 have been shut down in the last few years, and there hasn't been a new power plant since the 1980s. Widely considered to be the largest construction site in Europe, spanning 430 acres. It dwarfs the now decommissioned plant alongside of it, which is over right here. Hinkley Point A and B. Built in the 50s and 60s. It dwarfs it. and it's surrounded by farms as far as the eye can see. But again, they always do these crop shots where you can't appreciate the enormity of the site. Right, and so these are large buildings. This is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 8 story buildings. That's a 6 to 8 story building. That's a 6 to 8 story building. That's probably 10, 12 story, 14 story buildings. Who knows how deep down underground these things are? Right, there's so many of these in just this little tiny site. The people don't appreciate when they call it carbon free. They're basically spitting in your face. So when you see it's unbelievable what they've really done. In order to get water, they had to put 8 miles of 40 feet wide pipe. I think it's 40 feet wide or 60 feet wide. Okay, so how nuclear kills fish. So this was a small plant compared to Hinkley Point. And this was about Indian Point, just past New York up. The environmental agencies of New Jersey and New York now require that the largest water users, nuclear plants, to either install modern cooling systems to prevent billions of fish from dying each year. And the narrator of this video said there was a few tons of fish would die each year. But the reality of it was, there's billions. So these aging plants, so that meant they've been doing this for 50 years, have a devastating, think of that word now, devastating impact on the fish populations. Environmental analysts in the 2 states, New York and New Jersey, have found the facilities kill more than 17 billion fish annually in New York and another 9 billion fish in New Jersey, because that's carbon free for you, see? When they say carbon free, it means it kills everything with carbon. That's the pun, right? You don't understand how evil and insidious and cowardly these people are, but they are. This is how cruel they actually are when they say something like that. So 17 billion fish each year in New York, another 9 billion in New Jersey. Are you seeing a pattern yet? Affected species include the endangered Atlantic sturgeons, which return to the Hudson River each year to spawn, and sea turtles, which are sucked into the cooling systems at Oysters Creek and Solemn Nuclear Generating Station. The National Marine Fisheries Service has found that once through the cooling systems, those 8 miles of pipes, they're vacuuming up trillions of newly hatched fish and destroying them in the heat exchangers. This is all the different ways they identified. There is strong evidence that the decline in the fish stocks along the entire northeast Atlantic seaboard is due more to the destructions of the baby fish than to the overfishing of the adults by the commercial fleets. Right, and the 30 billion fish we talked about earlier at the beginning, they were adult fish, which would lay eggs on top of that, see? Then overfishing by commercial or by adults or commercial fleets. The Indian Point plant on the Hudson River sucks in 2.5 billion gallons of water daily and kill about another 2 billion juvenile mature fish a year in the screens or the thermal. There's many different ways to kill fish on these sites. And the NRC estimated more than 300 billion baby fish, these are not like the little small fries, these are fairly big, are killed each year when they are sucked into the 40-foot wide intake pipes. So there's many different ways that each nuclear plant is destroying the ecosystem. Now, when you're talking about salt water like Hinkley Point C, each glass of water has 1 billion creatures. And 75 to 100 million of them are the phytoplankton, the bases of the food chain, the bases of the oxygen chain, the bases of the carbon sequestering chain. And when you're talking about taking that out of the equation, so you're talking about 16 million billion creatures every minute, typically for every nuclear power plant, the 360 nuclear power plants worldwide. That's what they're killing every minute. Per reactor, by the way, because those numbers are just a single reactor. So if a site got 6 reactors, you multiply those numbers by 6 each minute. So 16 million glasses of water every minute, which is equal to 16 million billion creatures. And so the glass of water has got a billion creatures, 75 to 100 million of the phytoplankton, which is the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. But at least 400 million in that same glass of water is going to be the eggs and larvae of all the species, right? Damn dry throat. And that happened just before I went live. I got a dry hack. That's the way it goes. Let's keep going. So how nuclear kills fish, they're not going to put that into the equation because this is a stupid industry. And call this industry carbon-free or any facet of it carbon-free. EDF's Hinkley point delayed again. Millions of fish could die. There's not millions at all, is it? There were 17 billion fish, large fish each year in New York and another 9 billion in New Jersey. Then the sea turtles, the Atlantic sturgeons, there's trillions of newly hatched fish are vacuumed up each year. Each bit for this is just for a single site. Kills 2 billion juvenile mature fish a year in the screens and the thermal plumes. There's many different ways it's doing. 300 billion fish are killed each year and they're sucked into the 40-foot wide intake pipes. So when they and Britain is notorious for downplaying every facet of that, millions of fish. It's not just the fish, it's every glass of water is a billion creatures. And these things they need 1 million glasses of water every second. It's the equivalent of 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks driving past your front door every minute. So imagine you've lived in your house and you can't cross the street because there's 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks going past your door every second. Like, kids, don't cross the road. It doesn't quite fit in that equation, does it? Hinkley Point C, this was the beginning of last year. It is way past that now. $28 billion over budget. Like, how do you go $28 billion over budget? How do you do that? How do you get that far away from the estimate? How do you get that far? That expensive? Because that's going to raise the price of electricity for its entire life, right? In order to claw back some of that revenue. Because you're not talking about interest on that, because that's going to grow interest. $28 billion over budget. Like, in all honesty, the best thing you can do is stop that site immediately, because you're wasting money on something that's going to poison everybody for millions of years. Because these isotopes that are released here from the fuel pools that are going to hemorrhage, and the word hemorrhage, you got to kind of make up your own words, because hemorrhage doesn't do it justice what we're talking about. Let me show you what I'm talking about. My apologies. So this is I'm going to show you the French model of Fukushima. And the model of Fukushima from all the studies was based on venting. It wasn't based on the nuclear meltdowns. I'll try that again. So think of this as venting from every fuel pool. There's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. So this is day 10. And I'm going to stop it on day 20. This is a model based on cesium-137 from Fukushima. This is 20 days of emissions from Fukushima based on venting. And so every fuel pool is going to produce that every day worldwide. But this one is based on 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. This is the French government. Like James Lucet called in earlier, and he was talking about this guy, Craig, who's got sites dedicated with my name on it to denigrating my name. And he's out there in the comments section using that site. So my name is there, debunking Dana Durnford. and Kevin Blanche. That site is used then to go out in all the Fukushima videos, or anti-nuclear videos, and pick fights with people who don't know how to fight back. It's truly one of the worst cowardly things you'll ever come across. But there's 1,000 fuel pools every day that are producing a plume like that, but you can't see it or smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it. But what makes it so dangerous on top of that is that every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms as far as you can see. And this is a satellite picture. This gives you some concept of the scale we're talking about. And everything there is going to be incredibly radioactive, and that the food is shipped out to foreign countries and everywhere else. This is a design. All the nuclear power plants have that built into the designs. And so these models, which is based on just a fraction of the inventories that were lost. It's just a fraction. That's what we're talking about. I got a hack. Nothing I can do about it. Sue me. My apologies. It happens, right? And all the shows we do. It's pretty rare for me to have a hack, right? So the official story is nothing got out of these buildings. That was last year. The United Nations came out with a public relation campaign that's ongoing perpetually now. And it was picked up by all the media, all the universities sat in silence. All the academics and all the scientists sat in silence. Or came out and supported the assertions that nothing got out of... This is just 2 of the 4 buildings that are missing. And at the top of the buildings were 2 fuel pools. Each pool would have been decades of reactor cores. Let's say 4. Let's be polite and say 4 reactor cores. Because they're taking the reactor cores out, a large chunk of it, every 14 months. They don't have a deep geological repository or repository of any kind worldwide to actually handle the high-level fuel or any other fuel. But certainly high-level fuel, if you put it in a deep geological repository, at some point it's going to melt down. It doesn't need oxygen to continue a chain reaction. And so eventually it will split the earth above it open, and then that will hemorrhage into the environment forever because you can never get close to it. The steam that will come out of the ground, like Fukushima, is catastrophic at 10 sieverts per hour in 6 places. That's a lethal dose. 2 sieverts is a lethal dose to a human. And much less than that too for the species, insects and birds and pollinators and whales, mammals and everything else have radiation poisoning, so they're showing up emaciated. Because they're producing more white blood cells than red blood cells, right? So they got less oxygen, less nutrition. But when you look at these 2 buildings, United Nations, who shouldn't exist, are just the lowest forms of life conceivable. They're the lowest forms of life. Their job is to promote nuclear for a military-industrial complex, according to Dwight Eisenhower. And according to George W. Bush, it's the New World Order. That's what he described them as. Let me play that video. The New World Order. I put a pig voice in a pig squeal in the background when he says it, quite appropriately. There was 865,000 extra cancers in Japan in the first year. Excess. Not everybody was diagnosed. Not everybody got health care, right? And like right now, I got Dr. Sternglass's song from James' site running through my head all the time. Let's do that over a couple of days. It's such an appropriate thing, right? What was I supposed to be doing here? A number of cancers. What were we talking about? I digress, don't I? Because there's a lot going on. The number of cancer patients rose by 865,000 in the first year. Well, actually, because I got a bunch of stuff that I wanted to bring out, so let me get started on some of it. Let me get started on some of it. I want to show you the nature of this beast we're talking about, nuclear. Bloop, 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 bloop. There we go. I put these little videos together because I really want to drive the point home. Why is almost every farm... Now, this is Fukushima. The 1-ton bags you're looking at in the background are radiation topsoil. And they picked up 30 million of them. And so if you put a 1-ton bag, 30 million 1-ton bags, a 1-ton bag, only one of them will fit in the back of a 1-ton pickup truck. They're big trucks, right? And so you're talking about 30 million 1-ton pickup trucks. If you put them bumper to bumper, that's 5 rows of traffic around the entire planet. This is what evil looks like. Look right there. Radioactive food. And so when I was putting this together, I was really struck. I had this epiphany because I was gathering up all these pictures, and I said I'm going to go out and look for like high shots of nuclear power plants, and it was just a random thing. And to my horror, what I started to discover, because this is the pictures I had already had, but when I started looking from above, I started seeing all the farms in the background, and I was like, oh shit. Now, you'll never hear anybody on the planet talk about this. As far as I know, I'm the only person that came out publicly and said, wait a second. Oh, crap. They're poisoning us on purpose. So these sites were engineered. The engineers, a lot of them are still alive and should be prosecuted under the racketeering statutes, purposely building these so they can poison you because they know they're hemorrhaging radiation. And this is how they keep the local radiation levels down, is they put it in active prime farmland and communities, of course. But active farmland. And so as I started to go further down the rabbit hole, I started gathering up pictures. I was stunned. And I was hurt too, because I realized the harm from the radioactive fallout. I realized that this is not a game. They're doing this on purpose. They're coming after everybody. And they're doing it by shipping food all over the place from nuclear power plants. They're targeting cities. They're targeting communities with this food through the big grocery store vendors, the chain stores, the chain restaurants, McDonald's, all the big fast food giants are most likely using the radioactive ingredients. And what's really interesting, because living in denial seems to be easy when you don't understand the bigger picture. But the idea is, for policy makers and investors, they'll seek me out. They'll be saying, you got to go look at Durnford's material. He's got a different version of what's really going on. And so when they finally work their way, and they will, every one of them, and that's why we see nuclear going backwards. Because every year there's more reactors going offline than is coming online. And last year, for instance, 2024, there was 660 gigawatts, which is equal to over 700 large nuclear power plants when came online in just solar power. But it's hard to comprehend, because I can only cover so much in the show every night. My voice can only handle so much, right? So some nights I'll end the show early because I know my voice is not going to, if I keep going, I'm not going to be able to do a show tomorrow night, right? And so a lot of times I'll cut a show short. It's because my voice is like, all right, mister. James gave me a break tonight, so it might last a bit longer. Foliage and soil uptake of 134 cc, which is pulsing energy 600 feet every second, by the way. And 85 strontium. Strontium is a bone seeker too, see? So you got, and cesium, so it's not just iodine that goes to the thyroid glands or the pituitary or adrenaline glands, right? It's any gamma. So cesium is a gamma. That will, and strontium, 85 strontium, is a nasty. It's in many ways it's the equivalent of the energy-wise of iodine-131, for instance, which is very energetic, but it's a short time. But strontium-90's got like a 2-year half-life, so there's 10 half-lives. But it's got that kind of energy. It gets in your bones and mutates the stem cells of the kids, and particularly the developing species, like the the babies of the species. Are extraordinarily vulnerable and sterilizes the adults of the species. Because we're pretty tolerant, we're not tolerant per se. It takes longer to manifest, right, to get diagnosed. But as the species, they're so tiny, they're reproducing so quickly. That's why we study the species, right? That's why we spend 6 years alone, not counting everything else, but 6 years, 4 to 5 months a year on the Pacific Ocean. Let me just give you a quick recap of that. So from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska, 4 to 5 months a year, there's 27,000 islands. And it's hard to appreciate how methodical I approached this. And I done everything, due diligence in every direction. But I don't recommend trying to control an underwater drone and a flying drone at the same time. I can make it look easy, but that's only because I edited out all the fuck-ups that I done, right? But it doesn't always look like that. This is a typical day, me and my trusty sidekick Zoe. And I'm heading back at the end of the day. And I'm in, it looks like on a nice day, this looks beautiful, a beautiful protected area. It's not. It's 19-foot tide exchanges. And that night in particular, I washed up on the rocks in a hurricane that I wasn't able to get reception on. And we done around $6,000 worth of damage to the boats and the motors and everything else. These are about the size of your thumbnail. This is a very rare picture. That was underwater, so you're very lucky to find that. But I went for 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean. And so the species to your left are now exterminated. Because the radioactive fallout really happened. We have all the documentation. I mean, they picked up 30 million one-ton bags in Fukushima Prefecture, which is only 3% of the land where they scratched up the topsoil. But this stuff covered the entire planet. So the research expeditions, where we're to, that's where it makes landfall. And there's 27,000 islands. The species to your left now are exterminated, period. The species to the right are... Now, remember, I dove this coastline for years. And the species to your left now are exterminated. Now, originally, I was still in a wheelchair when I was doing these expeditions. I spent 10 years in the hospital from a diving accident. And the species to your left, I'm very familiar with that. You would never try to go, because I generally, what you do is high tide, you go in, you put a beach line on one of the trees so your boat doesn't swing all night and you can get some good rest, right? And you would never try to go at low tide because you can't walk on that stuff. First off, you don't want to walk on creatures, right? But second off, you'll break your neck trying to get to the high tide line. And we're talking about, it's hard to appreciate how many species we're talking about. The whole story is just, it's such a heartbreaking story. So when I say Fukushima radioactive fallout is global warming, whenever you see these types of pictures with that connotation, right? The reason that's there is to remind you that these plumes are pulsed, every atom, every one of these radioactive fallout atoms, think of it as a snowstorm. You can't see it, but you can't smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it or perceive it. But every one of these radioactive fallout anthropogenic man-made atoms, and you put 200 million atoms in the head of a needle, but you can't see it. But each one is pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. So carbon grows trees, grows insects, grows humans, You can't have anything without carbon. We don't got no carbon, there's not a species left on the planet. But anthropogenic man-made radiation pulses energy at the speed of light, almost at the speed of light every second. You got gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas. And some of them are a little bit slower than the other. And sometimes you'll read stories, we cover it here every once in a while, where you have this apologist will write a story and they'll say, well, like alpha's not so bad because it doesn't pulse energy as fast as gammas or neutrons. And the difference is minute, but they're all very, very close to almost the speed of light. And if you know anything about science and anything about this kind of stuff, you know that energy never goes away. So you have invisible plumes covering an entire planet, in this case 19.5 days, 468 hours. 19.5 days. A plume covering the planet. That never goes away. That's not going to turn to stardust in 1,000 years, in 10,000 years, or 1,000,000 years. But it gets absorbed into everything. And everything has to attack it to try to deal with it, because it's not... The emission from a nuclear power plant are not stardust from the solar system. So nothing on the planet has an autoimmune trigger that recognizes it, and so they attack it. Typically, for humans and animals and everything else, we attack it with white blood cells for the rest of our life, every single atom. But we're talking about a pulse event. And you're talking about 20 million particles of iodine-131 in one study here in Canada, which means there's 10 times more 132, 30 times more 133, 31 times more iodine-129 with a 15 million year half-life. There's 10 half-lives. And so the iodine-131, 20 million particles of that, is unbelievably effective at ionizing and radiating the thyroid glands of insects and birds and pollinators and animals and humans and everybody else. But the 132 and the 133 is 9 times more efficient at ionizing and radiating the thyroid glands and pituitary glands and adrenaline glands, which means, everybody in all the species are producing radioactive hormones. In Japan, obesity rates doubled in the first year, which is a marker of radioactive brain damage. And radioactive damage never goes away. You can't cure it. You can't fix it. Your body has to attack it with white blood cells till the day you dies. Even when it builds a sarcophagus, we call a tumor around it, your body's still going to attack it. And it's in your body's pulse and energy. Every second it's got this pulse of energy. So cesium-137 pulses 600 feet. So your whole body's getting pulsed. It's wrecking chromosomes and DNA in cells for many other things. But it has to try to repair that every second. It can't possibly do it. At the same time, it has to flood the anthropogenic man-made isotope that's in your body, that area, the source, with white blood cells to try to build a tumor around it. That could take years and decades even. But eventually, if you live long enough, that's what will happen. You'll build a tumor around it. But at the same time, it's still wrecking chromosomes and DNA in cells. Now imagine you're eating it. Imagine you're eating it in all your food. Imagine you're eating it in all your food because you build these nuclear plants right close to farms. That's one of the strange things we've noticed about this industry. And then when they call this carbon-free, their version of carbon-free is it kills everything with replicating cells. And so the joke is on us. And so when you see these pictures, they know, because they have the studies, that the food is going to absorb the radiation. And not only humans eat food, species do too, right? And so this is how you bioaccumulate it in your body, and every single one of these atoms, you're breathing this in. You're drinking it, you're washing in it, you're doing your laundry in it. It's the worst case scenario. It should never exist. It's a technology that they knew, and Dr. Sternglass warned us back in the day that there is no safe limit. And what they mean by that, there's no safe limit. It shouldn't exist. Because your body attacks it with white blood cells for the rest of your life, and because it pulses energy almost at the speed of light every second, it wrecks the chromosomes, the DNA, the cells. And yes, you can use it to produce power, but there's nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. And so the reason we're seeing this... the cancer epidemic started in the 70s after the open weapons testing. And then the die-off of the species can be traced right back to the beginning of the weapons testing. And then on top of that, the British in particular, the insidious monsters, they're monsters, let's face it. The British spent 3 decades that I know about and I can quantify going out into the Atlantic Ocean on the continental shelf, which is the nursery of the Atlantic, and dumping nuclear waste. And so, like, their depictions have always got farms, as far as you can see. Now, the food in Japan was banned by 55 countries for a decade. Not Canada, but actual countries. Canada removed all the restrictions after 93 days. And they picked up 30 million one-ton bags, and they're growing food right alongside of it for sale. What does that tell us? That tells us that the contempt that they have for you and your children and everybody else on this planet and every species is absolute. They have nothing but contempt for us. They absolutely despise us. And that is alarming, to say the least. They are going to war against you, and it's appropriate you go to war against them. And if you don't go to war against them, then there is no future for anybody. The future depends on you. And this is your moment. This is your moment. This is your calling. If you're here, this is your calling. And I provide you with a steady source, a steady source of documentation, because I want to create a million little bastards just like me, because I'm a fucking bastard when it comes to the nuclear industry. Let's not make no mistakes about it. My contempt for them is absolute too. I despise these chicken necks, these cowards. Like, it's to me, it's blatantly obvious what's going on here. And this whole operation that I put together has taken years and years and years of methodically accumulating all the equipment. And it could take me 2 years to build a single operation, but that's exactly what I does. What I have to do in order to make the operation work, well, that's what I'll do. And every little piece of equipment is unbelievably vital. Everything is thought about. I don't buy anything extra because I can't afford to put money. I don't have the extra monies, right? And so everything is a sacrifice on top of that. But with a plan, I got a plan. You know, I can't use the skidoo without winches. And then I can't use the plow without the winches either. I can't get out of my driveway with the skidoo without the plow. Everything has there's a constant sacrifice that goes on here. And I typically spend all day, every day, if I'm not working, because right now I'm trying to build up tolerance. Right, I've had a rough couple of years. You know, I had kidney stones, I had cancer, I had heart attacks, and I had 7 stents put in, which is probably the most we've ever seen down on this coast. They actually flew in. Somebody out there was thinking about me, said, well, he's quite the bastard. We got to keep that guy around, because they flew in a special team. The local surgeons weren't allowed to operate on me, which kind of scared me when he said that to me. He went in to do the surgery, because I would have died that day. And they said, well, they were ready to do the surgery, and they came back to me a few minutes later and said, well, we can't do the operation on you because you're CIA or FBI. And I said, absolutely not. Well, he said, we're not allowed to do the surgery on you. So there's a special team flying in. They're going to do the surgery on you. And I can tell you right now, I was awake the whole time. And they were all business. I mean, they were the biggest smiles I've ever seen on anybody when they come in and introduce themselves. And I just wanted to get the surgery. I was on my feet after that. About 20 minutes after surgery, I was stood up on my feet, which is something I never thought I was going to do again, right? And that's why I'm still going strong today, right? It's because I had 7 stents put in. They opened me right up to get the valves. They didn't open me up. They done the surgery up through my wrists, right? I'm back. As soon as I got I got out of the hospital the next day, I begged the doctor to let me out. And that night I done a live show. Because the industry doesn't take a day off. Why should I? Then I took a couple of days off. Just wanted everybody to know that I'm back I'm still pissed off. So they got thousands. They got like 9,000 rather people on the site every day. That's all carbon free. There's zero carbon free about nuclear. I'm going to explain that coming up in a second. So you're building this. Look, they got all the lights on in daytime too. They're building this massive site. They don't give a fuck about. They just want to. Now on that dome, the stupid looking fucking dome there, it says Hinkley Point making Great Britain net zero, which is a paper written by Miles Allen. Got a cushy job at Cambridge right now. It was weaponized. That paper was taken by UN, which is a military-industrial complex, and weaponized against us. We were going to play that little clip of George Bush there earlier. That's what I was talking about. I haven't got the let me find that before I digress again. I can't believe we're into a new year. George Bush. Where's he to? Oh, yeah, I know. It's hard to comprehend how much material I actually gathered up over the last 23 years. But at one point, I had 7,000 lectures on nuclear. From Harvard, from Yale, from Stanford, from Oxford, from MIT, from Berkeley. I studied. That was when they first started putting. I got injured when they started, and they had just started putting all their courses from Harvard and Yale, Stanford and Oxford and MIT and Berkeley online, all the major shakers and movers. And that's what I listened to all day, every day when I was in the hospital bed. And so my education, I started seeing all these discrepancies. I started going, oh, shit, what's going on here? I started realizing, instead of, like I always thought as the professors from these institutions, they're the best. I'm getting the best education on the planet because these institutions, Harvard University, Yale University, Stanford University, Oxford and MIT University and Berkeley University, are only hiring the best academics on the planet. That was my understanding. See, that simply wasn't true. They were hiring the most useful idiots, and functional savants, basically, barely functional autistic savants. That's what it turns out these academics are. They got degree after degree, but they wouldn't go out and get a job, so the university hired them because they were really good at regurgitating the textbooks. This is it's a very important if you want to teach, right? They believed the lie so much, they were proud to come out but then you have exceptions like Kathleen Hinkley or Geraldine Thomas or many of these academics are just evil. They're actually just evil. Incredibly educated in order to be evil. And there's this whole history of academics or little fucking inbreeds went to university to get a degree so they can get a job to come out and lie to you and tell you it was like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine. Well, here's Mr. Monster George W. Bush coming up. Oh, you thought I forgot, didn't you? Now, he's going to call United Nations multiple times the New World Order.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations.
I'm sorry about that, folks. Anybody had their speakers up? I'm getting quick at catching myself, ain't I? But that's not forgivable. I'm sorry about that.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
The promise and vision of the UN founders, the New World Order. All right. So let's talk about another facet of nuclear that they don't acknowledge. Just first off, they got a lot of terrorists. That's the shoe bomber, and that's his twin brother, Stinkfoot, who's now was hired by TEPCO to plot the destruction of my reputation, and it's known as Operation Long Jump. And Shida Machado, when he's not there, he's the towel boy at the bathhouse down in Japan, apparently. So, like, they're telling you it's like walking in sunshine, right? That it's like radioactive follows like a banana or a potato chip, or like the natural rocks and stuff like that. That's what Shitface's job, Stinkfoot's job, Thunderfoot's job is. But like when you're on the ocean and you're close to a ship that's out there dropping nuclear waste into the ocean, and your Geiger counter is freaking out, it's obviously not like a banana or a potato chip. I mean, they spend decades and decades just going out, and they don't give a fuck about anybody, dumping it into the ocean. Fukushima residents can visit the graveyards. That was 7 years later. But why would you go back to a nuclear wasteland? I mean, they picked up 30 million one-ton bags. There was 150,000 sites like this. But their history is just dumping stuff into the water tables and everything nuclear touches. So up to 500,000 tons of sulfur from coal. That's how much pollution is produced each year. 300 tons from oil, 300,000 tons from oil, 200,000 tons from natural gas. And they said a 1,000 megawatt nuclear plant releases no noxic gases or other pollutions, and much less radioactivity per capita than is encountered from airline travel. So they're saying that there's no emissions from nuclear. You'll see that lie constantly. 30 million one-ton bags undo any benefit nuclear might have ever had. Not that nuclear has any benefits. The decades of dumping it into the ocean. And so just because you come out and lie to you, because they have the platform, they have control of the media, they have control of the universities. Like, this is the next picture you're going to see. These people died that day. They're in paper suits after Fukushima, spraying a reagent to bind with the fuel particulates, so they're not splitting atoms into the environment to try to bring down the numbers. They would have died within an hour or 2 hours of doing this. Not maybe, not perhaps. They would have died within an hour or 2 hours of doing that. It's impossible not to get a lethal dose, because the reactors actually blew up, ejected the reactor cores and the fuel pools all over the site. So when you're mining uranium, and I remember I was showing this picture. This is the one of the Australian mines, and the comment section, someone showed up we've never seen before and said, "Well, that's a coal mine, Dana." No, actually, that was a uranium mine. And I went to their site, and I can't remember off the top of my head the name of that company. And this was the first picture I ran into. It was with the words mining uranium. But that pond is not a pond, that's chemicals. And every nuclear mining company uses chemicals to separate the uranium. And that's allowed to evaporate into the environment. So it's a very, very dirty industry. It uses the most expensive and massive equipment. Now, when you take this out of the ground, it has to go through an obnoxious amount of processes to get to the point where they're going to make a uranium pellet. So before it can even go to the reactor, it digs up mountains. It uses the biggest equipment on the planet because it has... these are chemical ponds. Like the fuel pools at a nuclear site in the old days, they used to shoot any birds that would land in it because they didn't want radioactive birds setting off Geiger counters anywhere else. 15,000 abandoned uranium mines in Navajo. And all of them got chemical ponds that are evaporated into the ecosystem. And they leach so much radiation or chemical water. You can't drink the water in any of the communities for hundreds and hundreds of miles. Not just because of that, but they also just dump it into the water tables. And then the whole process to get it to the point where you can actually put it in a chain reaction is the most resource-intensive industry in human history. Like, because the average person can't perceive all of this, that doesn't mean that it's not important. What you're looking at there, you're looking at this one and this one is just a fraction of the missile silos that America had. That's Wyoming, Nebraska, Colorado. All the little dots are missile silos. And each one of them are put in a little tiny community, usually in farmers' fields, and where they're going to hemorrhage tritium, by the way, which is going to poison the food in those farmers' fields. And they have to replace the tritium every 12 years or so. They can't contain it, right? Each one of these communities, little tiny communities, are human shields. So if the perceived enemy, the perceived boogeyman, which in this case typically now is North Korea, which hasn't attacked anybody in 120 years because they've been ostracized for 50 years by Japan, and after Nagasaki, Hiroshima, they were beaten to pieces, they were destroyed, napalmed into non-existence. Every community was napalmed by UN. Millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans that have no voice. And if we don't mention them here, they'll never get a single mention, will they? So every one of these communities were used as human shields. And if Russia or China or North Korea, which is never going to do it, but if China, which is probably never going to do it, if Russia, which is probably never going to do it, happen to hit one of these places, they're not going to say they hit the missile silo. They're going to say they attacked our little town. You're going to send your boys to go to war against these monsters. That's how they get you into war. In fact, it was Patrick Clausen was doing a presentation for the Washington Institute a long time ago, and he was talking about exactly that facet of how America, for instance, and every other country does the same routine. It's not just America, but in this case it was how America gets to war. I'm going to check the volume before I start this video. And he's going to talk about how they attack themselves to justify each war. I just got to check the volume. Okay, I'll get the volume.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
So he just named all the major wars and said that they started it themselves so they can justify the war. And what's behind all this is an industry that there's nothing too evil to do. There really isn't. So in order to call this industry carbon free, nuclear scientists don't work at Fukushima, by the way. The homeless and the destitute, the victims of society. And the industry will come out and portray the most dangerous, toxic stuff to everything with replicating cells as some kind of superhero. Like Superman, like Spider-Man, like the Hulk. We're all seized upon by the industry and then used to promote it, to indoctrinate the most vulnerable of societies. And they've done it like The Simpsons have been running for 30 years. Homer Simpson as a nuclear plant operator of, the total incompetence, right? And I'm pretty sure Homer Simpson's was modeled on Rod Adams. Not kidding you, by the way. So Fukushima, look, that's Fukushima right there. Let me bring that over. Let me. You'll love this one. Just bear with me. Right there. Okay, so this is that's what's left of reactor 4. It was 190 feet tall. Now there's a little stump there that should have been raised the rest of the way to the ground. But the top of that building right there is only 1/4 of the building. And the model that they're using, right, you can see all the openness of the side. But what they're actually talking about is that right there. So it's a misrepresentation. Right, when they show you this part right here, that's a misrepresentation, because that part there is basically really what's left, right? And so they built, you can see that furthest one over there. They built that contraption over it. It doesn't physically touch it. This physically doesn't touch it. And at the top of it, all they do is put panels around it. There's nobody. It's so important. So that, you see these panels, they're held there by gravity. They're great big panels, right? So that crane lifts the panels up and just hangs there by gravity. This was built off-site and brought in there, assembled. But see, there's nothing in there, right? There is nothing in there. So they put these panels around it, and and then they came out and said that they were actually in the fuel pool getting fuel out of the reactor. And then being the world media, the entire planet media, now came out, and because they built that contraption, this contraption is just simply meant to hide what was going on, and then the media came out and claimed they were in the building, at the top of a building that doesn't exist. Now they're doing that because Fukushima is an extinction event, as I showed you earlier from the research expeditions. But when they call this carbon-free, you got to think of the legacy of this history, of this industry. And you're not just thinking about America, not just about Canada or China or Russia or the Soviet Union or anybody else. That collective, though, of what they all done the same thing. And so Hanford, for instance, just what they dumped in the soil, and it wasn't in drums, they dumped it directly in the soil because it was so toxic, was 450 billion gallons that they acknowledge, which is equal to a 6-foot wide aquarium, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet, of waste of splitting atoms dumped directly into the soil. Right, and this is what they're dumping into the ocean, is stuff that's splitting atoms. And those drums, as they get down about 100 feet, they got 3 atmospheres, right? 50 pounds per square inch on it or something. And so those drums will collapse. And if they don't sink, they'll shoot them. And then they're going to call it carbon-free. This was the guy who, the so-called father of nuclear weapons, he understood what radioactive fallout was. And somebody put this neat video together. Now I am death. Now I'm becoming death, I think it was.
He knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
Yeah, because the radioactive fallout attacks everything with replicating cells. That's why you see those particular connotations, right? So when you call nuclear carbon-free, that is offensive. Because this is not, and can never be, it wouldn't, and could never sustain a debate. You could never win an argument. And I am open. I put my phone number at the beginning of every video, don't I? Well, just about every single video, you'll see my phone number. And we invite in any nuclear academic. And if they could come out and debunk me or debate me, they would have. They wouldn't have people like Craig out there using ghost accounts to assault me and my reputation. But that's the price you're going to pay. And I knew that when I went public, that in order for the story to have some credibility, some prominence, I needed to come out and, because I know the industry would attack you brutally, viciously, and relentlessly, and they have an enormous amount of resources, and they have access to all the medias worldwide, and that's quite the powerful thing to do to you. And I was like, yeah, the hell with it. I got no choice. They're going to kill the planet now from Fukushima. It was a pulse event. So when you tell you Fukushima or nuclear is carbon-free, if you own that shop, would you call that carbon-free, that you abandon your full inventory shops or universities or banks or malls or schools or communities, gold and jewelry in the diamond stores, all the cars at the car dealerships, abandon all the motorcycles at the motorcycle skidoos and ATVs, abandoned because you had a power plant breakdown. You ran away. You couldn't go back and get your pets that you left behind, so they starved to death or died of thirst. And every facet of nuclear industry's history is a well-rehearsed, recycled lie. They're telling you the same lies since the 60s. It's the exact same lies. And the reason they do it is because that's the official cover stories, right? Like it's like a banana, or the radioactive fallout is like walking in the sunshine, or sleeping next to somebody, or climbing a mountain. You know, at Fukushima, the Fukushima 50, that's who was allegedly behind the TARP, was the Fukushima 50. They didn't want them. This was the end of the media's involvement with the so-called Fukushima 50. They wanted their privacy, right? And that's why they're hid behind the TARP. But the reason they're behind the TARP was just because people don't think things through. They don't have critical thinking skills, are not quite up to par anymore. And so the people behind the stupid blue TARP are dressed the exact same as the people that are holding up the TARP. So the Fukushima 50 are not going to stand out as an individual if they didn't have the TARP there. They all look the same. They're in paper suits. And a paper suit can't protect you from just radioactive fallout, let alone the actual fuel on the site. So to call something like this, where you abandon your pets, you abandon your farms, you abandon everything, and then the 1,000 tanks, we've counted the tanks over and over and over, and all the pictures. Most we ever got was 750. They were all built in 2013. But if you filled up one of these tanks, you're talking about 1.4 million sieverts, which at 2 sieverts or so is a lethal dose. So if you filled up a tank with the radioactive water you're pouring over a nuclear meltdown, you can no longer build another tank, and you can't get back on the site. And if you have an earthquake, and they're built on a fault line with 1,000 earthquakes a year, about 40 miles away from the tectonic plates, with a 3,000-year legacy of tsunamis, you're gonna lose some of these tanks. And there was an earthquake a few years back where about 50 of the tanks had shifted. They didn't shift because they were full; they shifted because they were empty. They were built to make people complacent that nothing got out of the site. Right? There's a lot of examples of that. I showed you a couple earlier. But I mean, they're pretending they're in a building that don't exist. That is the same lie as the tanks. The tanks, like a single reactor would fill up all those tanks, 1,000 of them, if they did have them there, 6 times a day. Because it needs 4,500 tons a minute. You can do the math yourself. And so when you look at Hinkley Point C, and this is just a little tiny fraction of the site. you start to appreciate, look how deep it is. Look how tall these structures are. Look how much material goes in. And everything is triply inspected. Everything is triply inspected. And so I find it really offensive every time I hear the word carbon-free. And anybody's around here regularly knows that is very offensive, right? Hinkley Point, the most productive nuclear power plant, closes. And it's surrounded by farms as far as you can see. Now they're hoping to have all their plants built by 2050. They can't even finish Hinkley Point C. And like, this is one of the few pictures where you can see the farms in the background. But the farms comes right up to the site. They're poisoning you on purpose. So when you die, that's called carbon-free, see? When your child is in hospital dying of leukemias and everything, cancer from this radioactive fallout or radioactive food they ate from the supermarkets that sold that stuff, that's called carbon-free. Atoms for peace. There'll never be peace. Atoms, like the victims, they'll take them to the hospital from the radiation sickness and then finish them off with radiation. And they'll call it therapy, of course. And there's a few brave doctors have spoken out. Just give me a second here. You're going to hear the sound, but just bear with me.
Everything I've seen.
And this is a doctor talking about radiation and chemo, or well, we'll let him explain it, actually.
Everything I've seen in all the autopsies I've done of cancer patients, not one of them died of cancer. They died of liver failure, they died of cardiac failure, renal failure, all due to chemotherapy. We got a patient that had been through chemo and radiation, and they had cooked her liver and cooked her kidneys. We looked at the blood work and realized she had no organ function to speak of left. And I said, we can make her more comfortable, but the radiation treatment that they used on her has actually destroyed her organs. So we did what we could. She'd been given 3 weeks, we gave her 6 months. And she got time to say goodbye to her family. But I remember walking into the office the morning after she passed, and this internist was sitting on the waiting room couch. And I said, what's the problem? And she looked at me and she said, I'm doing the death certificate, and I don't know what to write for cause of death. I said, you might try writing the truth for a change. And she said, you know how much trouble I can get in by doing that? I said, if you're going to study with me, you're going to write the truth. And she wrote radiation poisoning, cause of death. She's the only doctor I've ever seen do that. She actually had the courage to tell the truth.
She actually had the courage to tell the truth. So I have a folder. It's called Radiation Therapy. Introduction to Radiation Injury, Another Silent Epidemic. So remember, all this is everything I'm showing you is carbon-free, right? So the victims of chemotherapy, chemoradiotherapy is typically what it's called, because you don't get chemo, you always get radiation mixed in with it. And there's no level that doesn't cause an assault injury to your body. So I just want you to see this, to appreciate how sadistic this industry actually is. You'll get sick from eating the radioactive food because these disease factors are surrounded by farms. Radiation injury to the visual pathways. Radiation injury to the heart. Like radiation injury to the kidneys. So you get radiation therapy, and you get all kinds of tumors, all kinds of catastrophic hypoxia because you destroy all the ability to produce oxygen. Or you produce so many white blood cells, the red blood cells are so low, because red blood cells carry oxygen nutrition, you're not getting enough oxygen. I mean, it's everything's an experiment, and you have to sign a waiver that if you die from the radiation, because it's not illegal to poison you, by the way, from radiation, but a good lawyer can make a case, right? So you also got to sign a waiver to use the radiation chemotherapy on you. Blood spinal cord disruption and central nervous system radiation injuries, radiation-induced lung injuries, radiation-induced bowel injuries. Are you starting to get a picture in your mind of what happens, what they do to you in the hospital? This is murder on a whole scale. This is a factory level murder where they're murdering you in the hospitals. These are factories to murder you. The radiation is the weapon that they're going to use on you. You're sick typically because of you breathed in the radiation from all the emissions. You drink the radiation because it poisoned your water source. You're washing your laundry in it. You're doing your dishes in it. And then when you get to the hospital with these tumors caused by the radioactive fallout, and then they use more radiation to murder you. And in Canada, they'll steal your children, for instance. Anybody under 19 years of age has to get radiation therapy, which murders them and causes these catastrophic other health issues. Yeah, they might get rid of one tumor, they just create 6 more. Central nervous system radiation injuries. Don't forget now, everything I'm showing you is carbon-free, right? Because carbon-free is when you die or the animal dies, then it's less carbon. That's carbon-free. That's the sickness that we're talking about of this industry. Injury to the cranial nerves, the nuclide following proton beam radiation therapy. So how can therapy be something that murders you 100% of the times? And that the studies, let me show you one of these studies. There was a study done about chemotherapy, for instance. Not radiotherapy, but we always see this partnered up anyway, right? These are some sick people. This industry needs to be treated the same way they've been treating you, right? All right, here we go. I'm going to come back to the radiation therapy in a second, by the way. 3% efficiency of chemotherapy treatment on cancer cures. 3%. This was a study, a repeat study. The original conclusions based on facts were 1985. This was validated again in 2004. Based on facts collected by the worldwide research, was published in 2004. Result the overall contribution of curative and adjuvant cryotoxic chemotherapy to a 5-year survival in adults was, not kids now, but adults. Kids is even worse. To adults is estimated to be 2.3% in Australia and 2.1% in the United States. So like when you see these studies, assessment of radiation-induced brain injuries, and radiation-induced lung injuries, and so perhaps everyone should contemplate and think of chemotherapy as the alternative route. Because you got to be very careful of criticizing the nuclear industry, as I found out. Based on this extensive document, it is clear to state that we're losing the war on cancer. In fact, I believe this is based on clinical oncology document. It is safe to state that we have actually lost ground with our new and improved synthetic man-made chemotherapy agents. Granted, 3% in 1985 was horrific. So all of our research dollars have resulted in a negative 33% further decrease in benefits. And we're talking trillions of dollars. So, how can you call something that murders 97% of the population that's exposed to it, and 100% of the animals, by the way? When you look at these studies, small bowel radiation injuries, radiation-related breast injuries, there's class action lawsuits on that one. Gastrointestinal syndrome from radiation. Vitamin C uptake, by the way, may save lives after radiation accident or radiation therapy. There is no such thing as radiation therapy. They call it should be called genocidal radiation from a hospital. All the hospitals, when they start giving you your loved ones, and I'm sure all of you know, it's very painful for most of you, I'm sure. It's very painful for me. Radiation-induced brain necrosis. And I can play testimonies in Congress of the victims' loved ones who were very articulated of how their children were just annihilated by radiation. No mercy. Zero fucking mercy. Radiation-induced normal tissue injuries. Oh, my favorite, radiation-induced rectal injuries. You go get radiation therapy on your brain, which destroys your ability to speech, and you end up with rectal injuries from the radiation therapy. Spinal cord recovery from radiation therapy. Radiation therapy to your valves for your heart. Patients with radiation-induced bowel injuries. But all this is considered radiation therapy. Radiation rectal. There's a ridiculous amount of these studies. Acute injury of the glands during radiation therapy. Radiation-induced liver diseases. Radiation-induced bile duct injuries. There's nothing that this stuff doesn't destroy, is it? I haven't found a fucking thing. And I get a little upset sometimes. I apologize. I get a little colorful as a commentator. Experimental study on acute brain radiation injuries. Radiation-induced brain injuries. Radiation-induced brain injuries. So it's not. They all say very little is known about small amounts of radiation. You'll hear that study all the time, that statement all the time from the fuckers on TV. Radiation-induced brain injury after proton radiotherapy. Radiotherapy. Have you seen any facet of fucking this stuff that quantifies the assertion this is a therapy? If you try to give them or their children the same doses, they'll fucking murder you right on the spot. They don't mind doing it to your children, do they? The pieces of shit. Oh, but no, Dana, it's carbon-free. It's carbon-free because you're no longer here, so it's carbon-free. You're made of carbon. It's carbon-free. Modification radiation-induced brain injuries. Everybody on the planet should be going to war against these fuckers. I can tell you that right now. And if the people out there thought they were smart as they think they are, they'd be gone to war too. Brainstem injuries after intensive radiation therapy. Oh, you got brainstem injuries. What a surprise. Not. Radiation-induced brain injuries. There were so many of them studies. Like, I got a folder just on that. I've only done one show where I actually brought out that folder. We got to do another show where I go through all of that stuff. Because that stuff fucking scares me. That's what scares me is these studies. I got 60,000 of these types of studies, and that scares the living shit out of me. And look at all the people, when you see these blue names there, they're the fuckers that are making a fortune by studying your loved ones, the victims, like they're lab rats. And none of them spoke out and said, stop fucking doing it. Radiation-induced brain injuries, after radiosurgery. Radiosurgery of the brain. Radiosurgery. Yeah, it's where we take a whole bunch of radiation, we blast the fucking brain with it, and we hope that it's we don't know, we got to kill a couple of million fucking people to see if it works. Yeah, it's a dirty job, but only a nuclear scientist can do it. Recurrent brain tumors from radiation injuries. Recurrent brain tumors from carbon-free radiation. Study on radiation-induced brain injuries after, radiotherapy. How the fuck can you call this radiotherapy? Isn't this why we made wood chippers so we can get rid of these people? Radiation-induced brain injuries. If you took this stuff and try to inject them, they will fight like they would pick up everything within hand reach of them, throw at you, try to get away from you. And if you knock them to the ground, you're getting ready to stab them with the fucking radiation therapy they stuck in your kids. They'll be like, no, please, don't, please. I said, but you just stuck into my kid. It must be all fucking K. They shit their fucking pants right on the spot if you try to do it to them. They got no problem sticking it in your loved ones, do they? No problem sticking it in the children. No problem they'll stick it in fucking babies. As long as they make $50 off it. $60, $70. Clinical approaches to reduce brain radiation injuries. Try not fucking giving it to them. You scumbags. Radiation-induced brain injuries, brain tumor progressions from radiation injuries, from cranial irradiation. Oh, joy. Yeah, they're going to fucking whack your brain with a whole bunch of radiation. Maybe that'll help. We're not sure. Never helped the last couple of dozen million people, but it might help. You got no choice. You signed a waiver. You can't sue us. It's not illegal to poison you with radiation because you could never fucking do that if it was, right? And Congress and Parliament doesn't have the authorities to make it illegal to poison you with radiation. Under the Nuclear Regulatory, so if your loved one dies from radiation, sue the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Doesn't matter if you're going to win or not. Sue the fuckers. Tie them up in litigation, and that'll slow down the genocide. Radiation-induced brain injuries. Jeez, I've never heard of that before. Radiation-induced normal brain injuries. What the fuck is a normal brain injury from radiation, I wonder? Test battery for the assessment of radiation-induced brain injuries. Mitigating radiation-induced brain necrosis. How the fuck are you going to do that? Your brain is rotten is what they're saying. That's what necrosis means. Microwave-induced brain injuries. You can do it from Wi-Fi, from cell phones. Injuries to the brain from radiation therapy with the whole brain. Oh, great. Yeah, we're going to do some radiation therapy on your kid. The whole brain. They're going to be okay. Oh, yeah, they'll be okay. We do it to millions of people every year. It's totally safe. How many of them survive? Well, I don't know. None that I ever seen personally, but brain radionecrosis after adjuvant radiation therapy. Like calling it therapy. So if I go out and shoot you in the fucking head and say that's therapy, then the judge will like, oh, well, it's therapy. It's not a crime. Because that's what's going on. That's what they're doing, right? Cognitive impairment in young patients treated with radiation therapy for a brain tumor that they got from radiation exposure. Radioactive food grown around nuclear power plants. Or even worse, from fucking scumbag Japan. Look at all the people that are paying their mortgages, their children's dental and health care, and their soccer tournaments, and their music lessons. They're putting money away for their college funds so they can get the same job to cover up what their parents were doing all their lives. Aging mass detections, radiation-induced brain injuries. No shit. Yeah, they love taking the older people, radiate them, and then they got Alzheimer's and dementia. And they can't tell the true story. Radiation-induced soft tissue injury to the head and neck. And it's hard to appreciate. It's really hard to appreciate for the average person what's really going on in the background. Like there's a whole industry out there where they'll take the senior citizens, particularly people that have worked all their lives and built up a good savings and acquired a lot of material. They'll fucking kill them with the radiation. They'll end up in their house and steal all kinds of fucking stuff. Like there's actually documentaries about that out there. This is an industry of predators. That's what radiation is. Late radiation rectal injury. So a couple of years later you get a rectal fucking injury. Guess what that is? Hey honey, I always wanted a rectal injury. How many people fucking said that? I can't wait to get me one of those radiation rectal injuries. Ooh, baby, that sounds cool. That's carbon-free, Dana. It's carbon-free and it's therapy on top of that. That's pretty cool. Carbon-free therapy. It's not funny, I know. Radiation injury to the nervous system. Does it sound like a fucking hoot or what? Radiation-induced skin necrosis. Radiation injuries to the dogs. Canine spinal cord. Jesus. How did he ever figure that one out? Normally the dogs all die from the radiation. Yeah, Dan, it's all about experiment. Yeah, I gotta kill millions of fucking dogs, but that's what they're for. La 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 la. Scumbags. Don't worry, I'm almost finished. I'll give it up real soon here. So, let's talk about the dogs for a second, because I just want you to appreciate that fucking nightmare. Think about this study from Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico. Dr. Raymond Gilmany, for instance, was the lead author. And he's got 95 studies back when I grabbed all of this stuff. I got every one of his studies at that point. It was 144 beagle dogs where they inhaled plutonium-238, right? Death from the radiation occurred 1.5 to 5.4 years after the exposure. 144 dogs. Bone tumors in 93 of the 144 dogs were the most common cause of death. Lung tumors in 46 of the dogs were the second most common cause of death out of the 144 dogs. And liver tumors, so the dogs after getting exposed to plutonium ends up with typically 3 tumors from a single isotope. If they lived a lot longer, they get more tumors. Liver tumors were found in 20 dogs, were the cause of death in only 2 dogs. So bone skeleton tumors were the most prolific tumors, which is the worst way you can die, right? Liver tumors, tumors in these 3 organs, the bone is an organ, I guess, occurred later than the tumors in the bones and the lungs. And tumors in these 3 organs often occurred in the same animal and were competing causes of death. And these findings in dogs suggest that similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in humans accidentally exposed to 238. Well, there's no accidental exposures. But it turns out that it was discovered that the human kidneys are at least 50 times less efficient than the animal's kidneys are at removing plutonium. So you're 50 times more likely to die than the dogs, and every fucking one of the dogs died. But what's more alarming about this was that Dr. Raymond Gilmany had done a study on curium isotopes, which you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. And curium isotopes are the major byproduct of the radiated fuel rods. Geez, we're still going? I'm going to give this up, I guess. So, curium, now forget about the alpha emitting radionuclide part. They're the biggest byproduct. Not curium, not cesium-137, not iodine-131, but curium isotopes are the biggest byproduct. And they're 20 times worse than the plutonium. And the plutonium killed all the dogs. And the most difficult way to die. Besides the hospitals, right? Radiation-induced death. Brain radionecrosis after radiation therapy. How can you call that fucking radiation therapy when it destroys and kills everything? Radiation injuries to the growth plate. Is there any fucking thing out there that radiation doesn't wreck? Really? So we haven't got enough time to get through the rest of it. I'll just stick it there in case you want to stop the video later and look at this stuff. I know, I fucking hate doing this story. Because it's very real for me, right? I'm looking forward to snowfall so we can get out and see there's no species. We got to do the field research. We're slowly putting the operation together. It's taking a long time to get to this stage for that facet. But every winter we'll be able to get out there and do this. We're pretty well up to speed now. I got to get new spark plugs for the skidoo. We're waiting for the winches to come in. Hey, you know, the prices come down a lot over the years, I noticed, on the winches, thank goodness. Because now you can get really nice winches, right? They're waterproof. Like, they can put up with any kind of storm now, and it's just, that's the way, equipment breaks down all the fucking time, and you got to replace it all the time. So if you get cancer, don't forget to go to the hospital and get fucked over. All in the sake of carbon free, right? So everybody dies as carbon free. This site that needs 2 gas, oil, and coal plants just to run it every fucking day, all this equipment, that's carbon free, Dana. You stupid fucker. Look at it, it's carbon free, for God's sakes. And so this industry, like, everything runs downhill into the ocean, and behind it is nothing but farms, as far as you can see in every direction. Okay, we just got a couple more points to make here. But this is your typical nuclear power plant. This is Sellafield, United Kingdom. It's no different than, which used to be called Windscale, by the way. They had a meltdown at the plutonium reactor, the breeder reactor. And Hinkley Point is the same, no different, right? It's carbon-free, Data. You'll be carbon-free if it catches you, you fucker. So they show you that picture, but in reality, they should be showing you this picture, right? Satellite picture, because then you might actually understand it. And I can't get through the rest of it. Typical. Let's just run down through some of these pictures of this big, stupid, fucking carbon-free. They call this carbon-free, look. This is all carbon-free, Dana. And every piece of metal there is the best. Every piece of cement, every facet of this is the best of the best material you can get. The most precious and the most hardened steel of hardened steels. Everything is the best of the best. Everything is triply inspected, because that's what carbon-free means. It's just meant to lull the entire planet, and it's successfully done it, didn't it? 9,000 cubic meters of cement just for the base. Not counting the rest of the fucking site. Let me finish. I just got a couple more points I want to make here. Because there was a few things that stuck out to me about this. There's no way I'm getting through all of this tonight. And tomorrow night will bring its own nightmare, right? So let me just scroll down. This is so far budget. There is no budget. This is just spend whatever it takes. We don't give a fuck. It's nuclear. Go ahead and spend it. We don't give a fuck. And they're going to put it, the nuclear waste, they say, in a deep geological repository. But this is very deceptive, because this will actually be under the ocean. And at some point it's going to melt down, because it doesn't need oxygen. So they talk about fish, the dirty fuckers. And just get a load of this before we call it a night. So when you talk about fish, they show you that picture. They're fish, right? But then they start showing you cartoons. They show you cartoons. And at the same time, they say it kills a few tons of fish each year. The prick who was doing the audio. And then they show you these fucking pictures. These are very emblematic of SpongeBob, right? Remember SpongeBob from the Marshall Islands? Like Castle Bravo was equal to 1,000 Nagasakis. And so what they done to cover it up was made these cartoons to indoctrinate children called SpongeBob. But they put these cartoons in that fucking video. And said there's a few tons of fish might get killed each year, so they're going to have salt marshes and everything else. But if you watched the video earlier, you would know that nuclear kills fish in the cooling system. Billions of fish dying each year. There was just in New York was 17 billion large fish each year, and around 9 billion in New Jersey's plant. It's just a disgusting industry. The industry doesn't have a single redeeming quality. Trillions of newly hatched fish are destroyed in the heat exchangers. And strong evidence that the decline in fish stocks along the entire northeastern Atlantic seaboard is due more to the destruction of the baby fish than overfishing of the adults by the commercial fishery. They kill around 2 billion juvenile mature fish a year in the screens and the thermals. There's many different ways to kill the fish. over 300 billion baby fish are killed each year when they're sucked into the intake pipe. There's all these different ways they're killing billions and trillions of fish. But no, the industry comes out and shows you cartoons and says only a couple of tons of fish might die each year, when clearly the industry's entire existence is predicated upon you never comprehending everything I'm showing you tonight. Because the industry can never exist with consent, with an informed consent. It's an industry of hate. It hates everything with replicating cells, and when it kills it, it's called carbon-free. And so they call any facet, you're talking about all these plants worldwide with the exact same fucking attributes. Blah! Why am I telling you 500 more fucking times this year? Alright, we made it this far. I might as well give it up, let you guys get on with your fucking lives. I'm sorry, with your lives. I shouldn't swear on you folks. Bless your hearts for showing up. And this is just a single fucking story tonight. And I can't do it justice. I can't possibly cover, and I've been fucking rocking here for almost 2.5 hours. I can't possibly cover all the details, all the minutiae of the minutiae, the details of the details. They're very deceptive. And remember, they're surrounded by farms as far as you can see from a satellite, for fuck's sakes. All that's going to be poisoned for forever. And to call this carbon-free is absurd. The only thing that radiation therapy should be used on is fucking them. As soon as they graduate from university, you should start injecting all kinds of radiation into them to get rid of them, because you know they're fucking evil. They don't. A lot of them don't even. They're so compartmentalized. They don't understand how fucking evil they are. Yeah, we went down that road again tonight. We started to swearing and cursing. Once that starts, it's bloop. It is what it is. Not like anybody never heard any cursing before. And people are taught. And so, the big takeaway from all of it is they can be prosecuted under the racketeering statutes.
Are presenting themselves to medical professionals as an arbiter of truth and as a neutral referee and a reliable referee of the truth. And they know that those medical professionals are relying on journal articles to treat patients, and that if they tell a lie, if they're committing fraud, that they can injure and kill people. So, I believe they can be prosecuted, and not only can they be prosecuted for those injuries, but they can be prosecuted on the racketeering statutes for promoting fraud.
I'm sorry I wasn't talking. I hope other people will find it in their hearts to donate. I know James just said he donated again. It's James probably telling me I'm not, no audio. Yeah, I got it. We never missed too much that time, right? But the racketeering statute audio worked, so that's all that mattered. Okay, thank you, James. Hugs, my friend. And we're going to play one of James's songs. That's the same James right here we're talking about, who's now just transcended activism in many ways and continues to do it every time. And I don't want to put too much pressure on him, right? But just keep making these freaking videos, man. I love them. Anti-Nuclear Anthem is the one we're going to play next. The Idaho National Laboratory, INL Cafeteria, PA recording. That is an amazing song. This is the one he was talking about India earlier. Dr. Sternglass, absolutely loved that song. The rhythm in it. I just want people to not just listen to one song, but appreciate Medusa Gift Bags. I love it. Lost Shells, love it. I love all of it. Nuclear Renaissance, Nuclear Jamaica, that one right there. Fukutomian Girls. Jingle Beckwell's just amazing. First Noel, Deck de Cours. They had me howling them. He's got so much, like, you can make album after albums of the fantastic stuff, and then the visuals now that he's adding, all of it's good. I'm just saying my preferences. I'm just a super fucking fan, right? Because this is earth-shattering stuff. Okay. We'll see everybody on the next show. Have a nice night, everybody. Thank you for finding the time and the fortitude and the courage to try to get educated or at least listen to the story. Take care.
Steel mill thresholds exceed, equations crack under corporate greed, systems bend, containment fails.
The weight of risk tips the scales.
Visions chain unyielding flow, a calculus you fail to know. Decay constants, half-life trails.
But oversight in detail derails.
Energy spike, the grid's unsure. Your model breaks, no second cure. Turbine stalls, the circuits fray.
Feedback loops that pave the way.
Critical mass, the margins thin. Designs that falter won't win. Reactor cores unsound at last.
The safety margins won't hold fast.
Who'll explain the flaw? The system's final draw. Neutrons strike and split. The cracks are infinite. Who'll explain the loss? The price you've never glossed. Safety's edges breached. Your threshold's overreached. You hid the failures, ignored the loads, overconfident in the paths you chose. Cooling pumps stall, backup strain.
Yet profits rise while risks remain.
Core geometry starts to shift. In every error lies the rift. Your simulations fall apart.
A breakdown written from the start. Reactivity peaks The flux is high, the pressure mounts, containments lie. No equations left to mask decay. Your system folds, swept away. High energy malaise.